Varney. I'm a kindergarten teacher in Pike County, right here in Pike County. And I've been teaching for 23 years, and this is my 16th year in kindergarten. And I tell you that just so if this old woman does something wrong, you can just excuse me because I'm old. Yeah, I'll do it if you don't want to. I started my unit. Let me back up just a little bit because last year I was fortunate enough to get a STEM Fellow grant and the ARI grant year before last. And with that, I purchased 3 iPads. So this year, when I decided to do Force and Interaction with the kindergarten, I decided my research question would be, will technology enhance students' learning in the area of forces in motion? And that way I got to order another iPad. And I also ordered, you can see the Osmo. I don't know if anyone has ever used Osmo on your iPads, but it's something you should really look into. It's only about $80 per iPad, and it gives you 4 separate games, interactive games, software that you can use, and one of them is called Newton, and it's really good for force in motion, force interaction. And then I also purchased from Lakeshore the Force in Motion tub, which had all kinds of manipulatives in it, and then I ended the unit with these 3 fairy tale projects from Lakeshore, which actually were really, really nice. It's 3 STEM projects where they got to decide, they got to build a chair that Goldilocks couldn't break. They got to build a troll bridge that the 3 billy goats would hold all 3 of the 3 billy goats gruff, and they got to build the 3 little pigs house that would keep the wolf from blowing it down. So it was really quite. Oh, come over. Space bar? No, here it is. I began my unit with a pre-test interview. I brought the kids up one by one, and I just asked them the question. I said, what could you do to this car, to this marble, to a ball, to affect the speed or direction? And what objects could you use to help you? And out of 24 students, 23 of them went, I don't know. The words force, motion, that really, I think it intimidated them a little bit. I think the vocabulary. I had one little boy, he said, well, I could put a turbo booster on a car. And I said, okay, that would affect what would that affect? And he said, the speed. And I said, yeah, it would. But he said, I really don't know what to do with a marble or a ball. And I said, okay. So out of that whole pretest, I had one child that gave me one response. So that's how I just wanted to see where we started, where we were going. Well, I handed out I grouped my kids into 6 groups randomly, 4 kids in each group. And I gave them the vocabulary cards, motion, force, push, and pull. And then I gave them a picture that represented motion, force, push, and pull, and they had to match them up. It was very difficult for them, especially if they looked at the force card. I don't know if you could see it here, but it's got a man pushing and a man pulling. So a lot of times they looked at that, and I could hear their discussions. Well, this guy's pushing, and the kids were like, yeah, but this guy's pulling. And so they struggled with that. But then when they saw the door being pulled, they said, oh, no, wait a second, this one's pulling. So it was really good just to walk around and listen to what they could do. I had one group that got all 4 correct, and this is at the beginning. I also did a smart board activity where we matched them after they did it in their small group and had their hands on it. They also got to come up and like each one has a picture like the pull, and at the bottom I have pull, push, force, motion. And I pulled a stick, and the kid got to go up and decide, and they tapped it, and if the word spun, then that's the word that was correct. So they got to check themselves using this. So you saw a lot of the kids switching cards around because they realized that they were incorrect. I also did what's called a QFT. I don't know if you've ever seen this process. It's usually used in high school or middle school. We recently were trained on QFT technique, and we actually had visitors in our classroom when we did this. I took the story, and everyone shouted pull. It's a first look at force and motion. And the kids I showed them one page out of the book, and they actually came up with their own questions about what was going on in the picture. And that really was just to spark some interest, and they had a really good time with that. Of course, you read. These books were just some that were available in our library at school. Push-pull, how things move, forces of motion. Each day we read one of those and then went into an activity. After we read the push and pull book, our first activity, which was suggested if you've not seen the web site betterlessons.com, it's free, and there are some really wonderful lessons by teachers just like us. And one of the suggestions was after the push and pull discussion, we went out on the playground. We found a time where it was just us. And I told them before they left, I said, here's the reason why we're going to the playground today. You've got to figure out how are you using pushes, how are you using pulls when we go out to the playground. And when we came back in, they came up with all these words. They told me that they use push by flipping over the bar, swinging, sliding, playing tag. The horse, because they said I had to push myself forward, And then they also said, well, we also pull because we pull backwards. And they also figured out running. They couldn't figure out what force are we using when we run? And I said, well, let's talk about that. I said, run. I said, what are you doing? And they were pushing off the ground. So they really were fascinated. Once they understood what force was and what motion was, then we went in and we wrote about it. And I had to place this one, and I know you can't see it probably. It's my little Logan. He's a dog. He's got this beautiful curly hair. And his writing was, I use force to run away from the girls on the playground. So that was his, and because he was right. They said I use force when I run, I use force when I pull a door open or I push a door closed. So they really understood. Oh, I see what it did. It did take my Newton software font away, but that's okay. I've got it here. This is the actual Newton software that I was telling you about. It certainly did. It removed it. It did. It removed it. The students use that. It's not your fault. Students use Newton software on their iPads, and they could draw lines, and it's really cool. This is the Newton piece. And what it does, it shoots balls down, and there's a target, and you can either use your hand. You see how it picks up the student's hand? It's like a little camera right here. And to make that ball bounce off and hit the target, or they could even lay down markers, they could lay down objects and would pick it up. So they had to figure out, how am I going to make this, how am I going to change the direction, how am I going to affect the speed so that it reaches its target. This is the tub. This is the force and motion tub that I ordered from Lakeshore. The smartest thing I've done in this entire unit is I let them have 20 minutes, each group, to just explore. This is just exploration. This isn't assigning any kind of this, and that really piqued their interest, and they knew then when I gave them instructions that they had to, apply, they had to just use the manipulatives I assigned them. So here they were trying to affect the speed and change directions of a marble using the ramps and using stacks of books. And they learned really quickly that the higher my books are, the faster that's going to go. Yeah. We also used force and motion in art. We took we were studying primary and secondary colors, so they got to choose which they wanted to use, and we dipped marbles and used cookie trays, and they just used force and motion to affect which way they rolled the balls, and they thought that was just the grandest thing to learn. Yeah. So, and then applying what we learned. These are the 3 fairy tales, and I let them choose. I let them sign up. This is the sign-up day. They got to decide. I showed them each one. They got to decide if they were going to do Goldilocks and 3 Bears, the 3 Billy Goats Gruff, or the 3 Little Pigs. And I read all 3 scenarios to them and the challenges. And then they each had to make an individual plan, according to which one they signed up for. Your challenges were you had to build a house. If you were the 3 Little Pigs, you had to build a house to hold the 3 pigs, and it couldn't be blown down. If you chose the Goldilocks, you had to build a chair to hold each one of the bears one at a time. And then if you chose the 3 Billy Goats Gruff, you had to build a bridge that was taller than the troll, but could hold all 3 goats. So they each decided on their plan. Well, then, though, they had to get in their groups and decide on one plan. That was the most difficult piece. They didn't want, the Goldilocks people never decided on one plan. They each did their own. They created, you can see the manipulatives they're using. They created their bridges. This is in the middle is the chairs for Goldilocks, and then on this end is the house for the 3 pigs. And they created, and it took us a while. There's our troll bridge. Testing the troll bridge. There's testing the chairs. You can see they've got 3 chairs. We could not, actually there were 7 chairs at that table. They could not decide on one plan. And they tested the house. I was the big bad wolf and had to blow it down. Then they drew how their test was successful or not, and if it wasn't successful, they had to go back to the planning stages and do it again. Then at the end, I did the post-test interview, and 100% of my students could name multiple ways to affect the speed, the direction of the car, the marble, the ball. 0% of them referred back to the Osmos. They used everything, they talked about everything that was in the tubs and the fairy tale STEM projects, but they didn't make the connection, even though I talked about force and motion whenever we did the Osmos. They did not make that. That wasn't as impressive as the fairy tales. So I mean, I'm sure it enhanced it, but they enjoyed the other things. So anyway, any questions?